Serious scientists of Reddit, what's craziest or weirdest thing in your field that you suspect is true, but is not yet supported fully by data? Psychology/biology. This is kind of out there, but I believe hormonal birth control plays a role in a subset of divorces and in the birth of children with poor immune systems. I think most people are familiar with the t-shirt study that found women were attracted to the smell of men with dissimilar immune systems, and that they felt t-shirts with similar immune systems smelled like their father or brother. Women on hormonal birth control did not perform well in that study, as they often picked similar immune systems as more attractive. A massive percentage of women are on birth control during their dating years and when they meet their husbands after marriage. Another percentage of those women will stop taking hormonal birth control in order to have children. What happens then? If you have a woman who marries a man who is a poor genetic match, someone she may not have wanted to be with if she wasn't on birth control, when she goes off of her birth control, it stands to reason that her perception of her husband may change. Given that her body and personality will be going through a change, while her hormones are re-regulated, her husband's view of her may change as well. It would not surprise me if the subconscious change contributes to divorce rates. In addition, should those hypothetical people have children, the child may have a poorer immune system due to the lack of genetic variance between its parents. Edit. Ladies, please don't let this scare you off of your hormonal birth control. The point of this thread was to share something weird that isn't fully supported by data. I do not have any studies that say that these changes in odor preference actually cause divorce or poor genetic variance in children. Mate selection is confusing, and odor is not the only determining factor. You don't need a scientist to tell you that. The only pieces of information here that are supported by any data are that women are capable of smelling similar and dissimilar immune systems, and that their ability to do that may be altered when they are on birth control. Nothing more. Chestnut blight was introduced to the United States in the early 1900s, and since then, all American chestnuts in much of the US cannot mature properly and will die at a nearly uniform stage in development. Much of the work I did in college was looking at the issue of the blight. My masters took me to propose that the chestnut gall wasp has a direct link to developmental challenges introduced by hormonal changes within the chemistry of C4 pathway photosynthesis. These changes are directly influencing a protein coupling mechanism failure and aiding the blight of the chestnut. My doctoral thesis is showing this without a doubt, and will soon present ways to offset the population growth of the gall wasp, and will soon allow chestnuts to be regrown naturally. They will then dominate our landscape again as they did early in our history. I have a personal specimen in the Smithsonian credited to my professor and I for being the first ones to document the gall wasp this far north on the easy coast. Edit. Whoa. Gold on my chestnut work. Thank you everyone for your interest in Castanea dentata. I cannot link my master's thesis yet because it is still well within the depths of peer review. My doctoral thesis is what I'm working on now. As soon as this info becomes available, I'm going to share with you guys. Thanks. Physics. We can, and will eventually, achieve inertial confinement fusion as a cheap and renewable source of energy. Here is the website to the NUF project. I can't say much more than the website tells, but suffice it to say I'm convinced it will work. And it will work soon. Astrophysics. Our entire universe is inside a black hole. Here's an article about it. This is, by far, the most educating r/askreddit thread I've read. Well done, gang. Psychiatry. There was a recent finding that 5 psychiatric disorders share some common genetic mutations related to voltage-gated calcium channel subunits in the brain. Voltage-gated calcium channels play a role in neurotransmitter release, which is why some medications that increase the amount of neurotransmitter in the synapse, such as SSRIs, seem to cure some psychiatric disorders for some people. This also might pose why electroconvulsive shock therapy works for some patients in treating their previously treatment-resistant depression. The shock activates the voltage-gated channels that are affected by the mutation. Psychiatry is probably one of the least understood areas of medicine. We still have no idea what truly causes mental disorders. Edit. Link, I was being lazy earlier. Edit 2. Well, this blew up more than I thought it would. I'll keep trying to respond to all of you. Great questions. Computer science / machine learning. There is a reasonable chance that, within the next 10 years, computers that analyze large bodies of data and make statistical predictions will be able to make much better routine strategic decisions at almost every layer of society than actual humans. This means many of the decisions that pertain to economics, politics, etc. At some point this will likely start having a major impact on the structure of society, as there won't be all that much room for argument when the computer says that some decision is or is not optimal. Some current signs that point to this, for example, are the story about an automated target marketing campaign that detected that a teenage girl was pregnant before her own father knew about it. Automated data analysis, when data is available, is simply better at predicting common events than real people. Why then would a corporation, for example, rely on human executives to make decisions about acquisitions and mergers? Why would a politician use human strategists to choose policy positions? And if a politician makes decisions by computer, why do we need the politician? This will raise some interesting questions. Should we still use human jurors and judges when computers can determine guilt or innocence with much greater accuracy? What happens when a human jury convicts a man and the Innocence Project makes an appeal on the basis that the judge-o-matic predicts that the man's chance of having actually committed the crime is 0.000001%? Should we have politicians set the tax rate when computers can do it better to optimize both economic growth and government performance? I would emphasize that this has little to do with AI. It's not intelligence, just prediction. And we'll have to contend with this issue long before computers become intelligent in the conventional sense. It also doesn't apply to rare, unprecedented events, so a computer won't tell you whether we'll invent cold fusion. But it will very much apply to events that have happened before: recessions, political unrest, effect of taxation on the economy, etc. I'm studying in a relatively new field of science called astrobiology and just finished my first internship. Of all my studies, this is what caught my attention. In 2004, the spectral signature of methane was detected in the Martian atmosphere by both Earth-based telescopes as well as by the Mars Express probe. Because of solar radiation and cosmic radiation, methane is predicted to disappear from the Martian atmosphere within several years. So the gas must be actively replenished in order to maintain the present concentration. Edit. TL. Doctor, I truly believe we will have confirmation of life outside of planet Earth in the next 2 to 3 generations. Chemistry. A lot of the accepted mechanisms for the way reactions occur are incomplete at best. Example: water and alkali metals go boom. The accepted mechanism is that the metal dissolves and loses an electron which goes to an H+ to make H, which combines with another H to make H2. Then the heat causes the H2 to combust. However, recent observations of various colors associated with metal vapor evolving during the reaction suggest the metal may be vaporizing at the interface with water, and that this reaction is occurring in the gas phase, rather than a simple dissolution of the solid and subsequent electron exchange. Edit. So a lot of people don't like the alkali metal with water example. So here is a bit about my own research. I'm working with a material that has been known since the 50s. It wasn't thought to be too exciting, but we understand more about the mechanism by which it forms now. We have been able to use this knowledge to add a simple compound to the mixture that actually slows the formation of the material. This has led us to creating the highest resolution photoresist in the world. Medical microbiology. I believe very soon, in terms of development of new treatments, that bacteriophages will replace antibiotics. For aditas who are not familiar with them, bacteriophages are essentially viruses that attack bacteria and bacteria only. Some of you might argue, well, there's good bacteria in our digestive system, right? True. Bacteriophages have surface proteins that work like a lock and a key, and can only combine with certain types of bacteria. Antibiotics often cause many side effects, and over the last 10 years have decreased in efficacy due to bacteria becoming resistant to the treatments. Also, antibiotics are delivered to the bloodstream and only happen upon the bacteria, whereas bacteriophages can reach the bacteria and take over its replication machinery and replicate exponentially. 10-8. Currently, bacteriophages are a relatively small part of medical research. Many studies are being conducted on the possibility of bacteriophages being utilized concurrently with antibiotics to increase the drug's efficacy, mainly by turning off the bacteria's defenses. Okay, I guess that's enough. Mobile version. Google for more information. TL. Dr. Bacteriophages will replace antibiotics. Biology. When personal genomic sequencing becomes readily accessible, even as a routine medical service, much like a physical, we should be able to place the data into a controlled, anonymized database and use statistical analysis to essentially link most disease states and predispositions to their genotypic bases. There are loads of combinatoric black holes in the genome data right now. Since we haven't been able to collect large-scale, high-throughput disease/genotype relationships on a genomic scale, yet due to the expense. Have a look at the company 23andMe for an example of a smaller scale version of this. They represent a good first step towards breaking the cost down and making personal genomics accessible regardless of socioeconomic status. Neuroscience here. Paraplegia/quadriplegia are solved problems. We are already very good at recognizing patterns of activity measured through EEG or other, relatively non-invasive recording methods in real time, and using this data to control various simple machines. The next step is expanding the scale so that, instead of controlling a computer mouse, a paralyzed individual controls legs or arms fluidly. Currently, the most well-known researcher adapting this technology to allowing paralyzed people to walk and move is Miguel Nicolalis, who plans to construct an exoskeleton to allow a paralyzed person to kick a soccer ball at the World Cup. Soon, very soon, we will be able to make this feasible for real-world application. Beyond that, the entire field of brain-machine interface is booming. It is a natural adaptation of where neuroscience is, because it is not simple, but relatively so, need to be able to recognize recurring patterns you observe when an individual thinks or does something to be able to use those patterns to control machines. It's a fancy trick to allow thought control without really understanding why or how those thoughts exist in the first place. Very, very cool stuff. Mathematics. There are probably an infinite number of twin primes. A twin prime pair is two primes whose difference is 2, egg. 3, 5, 11, 13, 41, 43. Previously it wasn't known if there were an infinite number of any prime pairs, given some number n. Are there an infinite number of n prime pairs where the difference between the two primes is n? As of now, the twin prime conjecture has yet to be proven, but lately there has been a lot of progress through the Elliott-Halberstam conjecture by Yitam Zhang. Recently Yitam Zhang was able to bring the minimum gap between primes down from infinity to 70 million, so there are an infinite number of 70 million prime pairs, though there is a lot of work to go, since the Elliott-Halberstam conjecture has a limit of proving that there are an infinite number of 16 prime pairs of primes with a difference of 16. My apologies if I got anything wrong. Mathematics isn't actually my field, but some of my colleagues are quite excited about it. Edit. Seems 42 isn't a prime number. And dang, I was hoping so much it would be, haha. Also, I've learned, if I want people to respond right away, I just need to make a small mistake somewhere. Astrobiology/planetary science. There are most likely billions of Earth-like planets in the galaxy. Not really controversial, but so far observational data has not found many. This likely a technological or methodological shortcoming, rather than the product of a representative sample, and that life, perhaps not advanced or intelligent, likely exists on many of them. Entomology. We have a malaria vaccine that, so far, has been successful in human trials. Here's hoping we save millions of lives. Edit. Apparently some people on Reddit would rather see these people die. Screw you if you think that way. Anyway, here's hoping you live a long and comfortable life. Edit 2. I can't wait for this to be archived. Then people will stop commenting to tell me how the world is going to be overpopulated because we've saved the lives of 2 million children a year. The implication being that you and I can live a better life because we're letting African babies die. I hate that mode of thinking. Malthus was wrong. We are not going to overpopulate. We haven't hit carrying capacity and we don't know what it will look like, so stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Yes, this is my thread. I think viruses were indispensable for creating complex life. Their unique characteristics enable them to copy and introduce genes from one species into another. Several colleagues have similar ideas, but only circumstantially supported. Astronomy. There are these things called Lorimer bursts in radio astronomy. The first detected only a few years ago. Only 4 detections since. Basically it's a huge burst of noise that asks for a few milliseconds and disappears. More here. The reason BTW these are so weird is they're huge bursts of energy, and they come from about half the visible universe away from us. This should not happen. And no one really has an idea of how these things would be generated, since right now there are no models for it. Anyway, people still don't know what they are. There's some discussion that it was a weather phenomenon for a while. And one telling thing is so far only Parkes Observatory in Australia, where the dish was filmed, has seen them, so everyone in radio astronomy is eager to be the person who spots one at a not Parkes Observatory. So my weirdest thing is these things are crazy mysterious. But I like to think they're real, and from far away. What can I say? I'm a romantic who loves curveballs thrown at us in science. And we only barely have the technology to look for them. Plus hey, it'd make a nice chapter in my thesis if I found one. Psychology/psychiatry. There is ongoing discussion on the neurological and neurobiological correlates to depression. Psychiatry has focused on neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, because most antidepressants have effects on these transmitter systems and seem to help the patients over the course of many weeks. SSRIs take at least 3 weeks to show measurable, non-placebo effects in patients. But, as a matter of fact, we still do not know why. A German psychiatrist now proposed a new model for depression, explaining it with a chronic overdose of cortisol, a hormone closely associated with stress. He was even able to treat patients with a cortisol antagonist successfully and within hours of treatment. Very short explanation of the theory, actually. His work has not been acknowledged very much until now, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is something true to it. Edit. I have written a follow-up this morning. Before more questions coming in about this, you may want to read and upvote this one. An interesting observation. The response lengths in this thread follow the average dissertation length proportionally for each corresponding field. Not too surprising, but I thought it was interesting. Edit. You guys seem to like this. I'm glad I remembered seeing that graphic a few months back. The Americas were inhabited by humans at least 30,000 years ago. Possibly up to 60,000 years ago or more. Lots of archaeologists whisper this in hushed voices. But there are so many entrenched detractors that there's no way for this to become accepted until the current older generation die off. Edit. 60,000 is kinda at the boundary of possibility. Dates of around 30,000 years in age are expected by a sizable number of archaeologists studying pre-Clovis material. A lot of people are asking me questions that I have tried to answer elsewhere, so please read through the commentary to see a list of some of the sites and dates in question. How the debate is currently framed. My opinion. Some opinions that agree with me as well as a few voices in opposition. Hopefully most of your questions should be answered there. Biomedical science. Giving Viagra to pregnant women will help combat obesity. It is well known in science that being born small or growth restricted is strongly correlated with later obesity, hypertension, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. These babies are ill-equipped for the calorie-rich world in which we live. and as a result their bodies preferentially store fat and essentially gobble up any glucose or fat that enters their bodies. A huge amount of the obesity we see today may be due to growth restriction. Viagra works by opening up the blood vessels in the penis to allow an erection. Viagra could similarly open up the blood vessels to the placenta and therefore the baby, providing them with more nutrients in the womb to help them grow. We are currently testing this theory in mice, rats and sheep. Clinical trials in humans about to start. Anesthesiology. Surgery and other actions that can aggravate the inflammatory response might be a contributing factor to neurodegenerative disorders similar to Alzheimer's. There have been some preliminary studies on stuff like this, and the data seems promising, but we have to take into account the effects of different types of anesthesia, different types of surgery, etc. Edit. To all the people asking for papers. I don't have any. This is all speculation. I thought that it was clear by the question posed by the thread. There's no hardcore proof that I can provide for you at this time. My apologies. I have a hard copy of a paper that was submitted to some journal, but it was rejected because it didn't take a couple of key factors into account. So unfortunately, there's no link to it. Also, poor word choice on my part. While I will refer to it as Alzheimer's disease, I'm really talking about general neurodegeneration that can resemble Alzheimer's disease. Many of the markers that we are testing for are the same. Chemistry. We will, eventually, be able to efficiently design enzymes to conduct complicated chemical transformations that would be otherwise impossible on unmodified substrates. A 2008 science paper, David Baker, Ken Houck, Forrest Michael, and a bunch of other awesome scientists showed proof of principle in designing a dialdehyde enzyme in silico. They designed the necessary transition state and the protein sequence that would form the corresponding active site, built the protein, and it catalyzed the exact reaction they intended to catalyze. It's beautiful work and they've done a lot of incredible things since then. Scott Miller's group at Yale has done similar things using much smaller peptide catalysts to do site-specific modifications of things like vancomycin, which is a huge antibiotic, in a very selective manner. What does this mean? Taking for example the development of antibiotics, we are running into problems of resistance. Bugs are developing immunity to existing antibiotics. Even our last resorts, like vancomycin, are starting to fail. We can bypass these resistance mechanisms by modifying the antibiotics at certain positions, but this can be an incredibly difficult process. If we could design protein catalysts to promote the desired reaction on the unmodified antibiotic in a highly selective manner, we can make libraries of antibiotics efficiently that can tide us over until we develop some other manner of treating infections. Thank you for watching. Like, share and check out other videos.